I think we could start with the audience questions. Yeah. So the trust rank and spam filter. Spam filter is pretty simple, and it's described on the spam.nostr.band. And it basically looks at the 1 hour of the most recent events, and it clusters those events by words, essentially repeated words. And if like there is a cluster of messages that contain roughly similar set of words, then and there are lots of them, then I think this is probably spam. And then all the incoming stuff that resembles that cluster is thrown away, like to the spam table, essentially. So it's a very simple thing. But when we were spammed very heavily with like 500,000, 1 million, several million messages per day, that worked really well. We were able to like save something like 30-40% of space. Now it's mostly idle because there is not much spam going on right now. And the trust rank, I thought that it was described, pretty well as well on trust.nostr.band. It's just a page rank and with some trusted set of users as a seed for the graph, for the distribution of weights. And I don't think there is much sense to even like publish the source code, because like I've got my own set of data and nobody probably has the same set of data. Nobody probably has the same graph. And it's really like, if you want to try something similar, then it's probably like a couple hundred lines of code to do this, given that you have some non-trivial amount of data there. But it produces pretty good results.
So the main thing is you need to collect enough data that you can actually do something interesting with it, and then the actual code to compute it is trivial, you're saying?
And it has to be run like more or less constantly, recalculated to incorporate the new data and the new people. And if you want to make something useful with it, you have to like integrate it into your other data pipelines. So it's not just like numbers. You have to make them part of the almost everything. Like what almost everything that happens on Nostr.band includes trust rank in one way or another. So that's that. And the second question was, I guess, about the trending topics and people. So trending people work really well, I think. I like the way they work. So it just takes the last 24 hours and finds all the new following events in the last 24 hours. Like you were followed by like 10 people in the last 24 hours, let's say. And then I just sum up the trust rank of those people. And that's basically it. Like, if you were followed by Jack Dorsey, that's probably a bigger signal than if you were followed by no-name account. So a person that had like 2-3 important followers, new followers, will probably get there in the list. And a person that was followed by like 100,000 bot accounts will not get on that list. That's the basic idea. And the reason it works well...
Do you imagine that this...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I think there was a little bit of a delay. I was going to ask, do you imagine that this kind of, at some amount of scale, you'd get more expressive with this and have more sophistication? And at some point, would it be more of a community open tunable asset? Or do you think that for kind of maybe for spam reasons or kind of optimization reasons, there's part of it that has to be held back? Or how do you think about the trade-offs there?
I think there is a place for both, like pure algorithmic rankings and curations, and for people, pure like person managed ones, and like some mixes of those. So right now, this is I think the best thing I can put, like automated thing that can show new content and new people on the front page, and it works. Like when we get bigger, maybe this algorithm will not be good enough, or maybe it gets abused by somebody. I don't know. Like it will definitely need to be improved. But then maybe just like along with it, near it, if we find a nice way to manually curate stuff on Nostr, maybe lists or curated feeds, something like this. And some of those feeds And if we learn how to measure like their popularity, then maybe some curated lists, most popular ones, will be there. So this like it's so early on Nostr, so like any algorithm that does like the basic, very basic job, I think is good enough. It makes no sense to be super smart here. So I was gonna say
just
that
get the basics in a sort of a working system.
Yeah. So the trending people tab I think works well because it's not dominated by like old people, Jack Dorsey, JB55, Yajav, because they are already followed by other popular people and like they don't get this much of a boost. But then if Jack Dorsey follows someone interesting, some new account, that account gets there. So trending people like regularly shows interesting things to me. Trending posts are worse right now, and I tried to like improve them this week, just did a little research there and couldn't come up at this point with any quick fix for it. So it is essentially dominated by old accounts with huge followings. And the algorithm there is like, take all the interactions with this post, take all the profiles that interacted with this post, like zapped it, liked it, replied to it, etc., and sum up their trust ratings, something like this. And so essentially it's dominated by the posts that are either produced by those popular accounts or like promoted by them. And you would probably need to
for any
like
reason, if it's replies or like
yeah. So it's not perfect. The algorithm is pretty simple. I haven't come up with a good idea of how to like make it surface more, less popular, but still trending and interesting content. So one day, hopefully I'll get there. And
right.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
But it sounds like these things have a lot of, they start to touch on, how discovery works, how algorithms work. And I think you've already been, suggesting some ideas around how these things could play with other systems, like some of the list systems being built, or kind of how it could plug into various surfaces. And I wonder, do you have already in mind a model for maybe like an architecture for plugging these things into each other? Or how do you imagine in the long run, you're starting with like a very simple, kind of a naive version that you can build upon. But if people wanted to take and build upon it in different directions or swap it out for different ones, do you have in mind, is it like a new architecture for how such kind of discovery or trending things should work? Or is it kind of premature to start building those yet?
Yeah, so I think there are, first of all, there's discovery through manual curation idea. And I think lists go there in that bucket. So if you can create a list of like interesting people, and then if you can switch to that list in your Nostr client, like in Amethyst, then you can easily like switch between feeds, and you might not even need any more of an algorithm there. Maybe if the people you've included in the list are kind of topic focused, if they don't just chat, then you might get like a pretty interesting feed there. And so when I was talking about lists, all I had in mind is that maybe people start creating those lists, and then we can start surfacing more popular ones, which can then like help everyone get some interesting feed for them. But that's one like interesting story of the problem with such a list is that we are not generally like a single topic people there. Like I usually try to post only about like Nostr.band or Nostr development or Nostr itself. But even I occasionally like chat with someone. And so it's hard to create a feed, a purely topical feed out of profiles. You have to like add some other constraint there. So I'm not sure that lists like can solve all the problems in the manual curation area. Like I'm sure it can. it's one easy option that we had, but there should be something else.
I mean, it seems like lists provide more signal into the trendiness or topness of something, right? It's just another kind of organizational unit who decides who to add to a list. If I don't know if lists can be named, but maybe at some point a list could be named. You start to add a lot of metadata about kind of just information about the graph and network.
Yeah, well, of course, since the list itself is a Nostr event and object, you can build all the same analytics and trust ranks and etc. on it. So it's like another layer for some automated algorithms. But what's the great idea about lists is that you would essentially have a marketplace of them, and no one is censoring you. If you like this list by this curator and you prefer to use it, then you're kind of deciding it for yourself. And but then the algorithmic feeds or aggregations or recommendations, like some people propose that we just have like a marketplace of different algorithms, different providers, different algorithms, and there are differences in terms of like how exactly one of such providers would deliver the data. But that's like details. The reality is that you have to somehow discover that provider, then you have to somehow like subscribe to it, and then you've got some surface in your app that like shows you the data, or you visit like the website of the provider, like Nostr.band. So that's like a simple,
right,
and it's already working approach. And I've got like several technical implementations of that. And even those several ones are not like exhaustive list. There probably are like 2 or 3 options that I haven't tried. And then there is an idea that Kian from Stacker News is like trying to pursue, where he wants to like have a standard definition of an algorithm, and then he would like some software or middleware like relays or some middleware to implement those, so that like the whole network could execute that algorithm, and you could get predictable, standardized results computed by commodity machines, providers, relays. They're they're not differentiated. Only the standardized algorithms are different. And
so it's like a container or a spec for how those algorithms should work, but it would need access to some sort of, would it need any kind of a repository of what types of npubs to look for, kind of public key addresses, or that would be part of the algorithm, would be how to traverse and find the relays where those messages exist?
I think the idea he was describing is that like each relay just calculates, filters and ranks the stuff that you request from it, like whether it's profiles or notes or long posts or anything, based on some standardized rules, like please order them by number of zaps or amount of zaps or something like this, or some trust rank, which probably should again be standardized. And then you query several relays, they return to you the results with weights and scores, and you just merge the results and you get the final ranking. I am skeptical of this idea because it's possible to do such a thing for a centralized provider. He can have distributed cluster where each machine does its part of the job, and then you merge the results. But for Nostr, where each relay is on its own, and they can be adversaries, they can try to abuse you, etc. I don't think it like, even if we came up with all the standards and all the specs around how this and that should work, and all the relays implemented them kind of supposedly, but then someone's going to write a relay or modify like an existing implementation to do something nasty. And if you think that you kind of like, there's no way to detect that really, unless like you manually recheck something, or maybe you could try to like compare the scores from different providers, but then each provider each relay has different view on the network. So the zap amount of his will be different from zap amount on that relay. So it's super challenging, and it kind of insists that relays are commodity, and aggregation layer is a commodity, consists of commodity servers. And from what I hear from like fiatjaf, it's probably the wrong way to think about relays, or at least all of them, because he keeps repeating that topical relays are a thing, differentiated relays should exist, etc. And so I would say that right now,
yeah, let's hear more about that, because I've heard that the idea that relays should be considered pretty dumb, and that they just are like, routers on the internet where, they take packets and they send packets. So they take messages and they send messages. But there's also maybe this content-centric knowledge that a relay might have. And I wonder, do you think that is the goal of maybe what fiatjaf is advocating here, is that the relay should have a topic in certain sets that people would read and write from them, but they would still have kind of that dumb functionality, but it's just like the selection of who writes and who reads from it would be topic-centric, or other things altogether?
Well, if relay sort of filters the stuff that it stores, like if I'm not just dumping data to it and can read it back, and it's all like accepts anything I write and then returns it. If it's not that, then it's already like some kind of algorithm behind the curtain. Like it may be automated or it may be manual, but it is some kind of filtration there. And so the fiatjaf's main idea with algorithms boils down to this. Just give me a URL of a relay that will give me filtered stuff, like on some topic or legal or NSFW or something.
Right.
And it's kind of good idea, I think. Like, given how Nostr works right now, given this URL, it would be usable immediately in almost any client. And so yeah, it's definitely one of the ways to like provide an algorithm. But then, but such relays, they have to like have a face. You have to probably have a website and owner, and it has to be probably marketed somehow. So that's like one thing. And then if someone just installs the relay code from a repository and launches it and just starts accepting writes and reads, then it's a commodity relay. So right now there are essentially no topical relays. Maybe we could call paid relays those differentiated relays because they have like a selection of people. But aside from that, like all the other relays are commodity. And I think there will be more custom, let's call them custom relays. And for those custom relays, people would want a way to discover them. They will probably start sharing lists of them, and then someone's going to make a website with them, etc. And the standard, let's call them relays.
Well, we were talking in private about the potential that a relay might have a relay, like what is the visibility of a relay, and should it be visible on its own, or should it be visible always like attached to a person who you discover it through? So do you already have kind of a view formed, or have you heard people talk about a view on that type of concept, or is that still kind of being discussed, or not really? Because I find like the idea of...
I didn't discuss this really with anyone. And it seems like fiatjaf wants these relays to be URLs, and we already have like UI, UX for adding relays as URLs, selecting relays, switching between them as URLs. So I guess we should start there. But probably eventually, like bigger relays will have their own Nostr profile, and they will have like their official Nostr profile where they can do customer support or discuss things. So like it will naturally evolve into relays having some presence on Nostr itself. Unless it's a standard dump relay undifferentiated, then it makes not much sense for it to have a face. So right now relays as URLs if it's should work fine.
So should we think of a relay as a URL, as a place I want to go or visit because I appreciate its policy, or I expect to get a certain content type there. And if that's the case, like, am I thinking of the relay as sort of like visiting a website where a bunch of people are
Yeah.
gathering, or do I think
Yeah.
of it like visiting a particular Discord server?
I think so. Yeah. So it
Does
starts
it give up any
resembling.
of the kind of
Uh,
sorry, I think it's just we have a little bit of delay.
yeah.
Is the relay going to serve, like, will it still have the censorship resistant property if sort of everybody's gathered at one relay? Do you expect there to just be like lots of kind of redundancy or clones of that same relay with lots of the same readers and writers on it?
I'm not sure really how this is going to evolve. Like, I didn't think it through too much, and we don't have really any like implementation of it. For like the only custom relays that exist right now are those paid relays, and I'm pretty sure that all the stuff that they contain is also duplicated in like all free relays. So like censorship resistance properties are probably fine there, but what's going to happen with the topical relays, I'm not sure. I would probably think of them more of like curated feeds. Like if it is by definition a filtered view on the network. Like it's not about censorship resistance there. It's about curation. So if someone wants to deliver their message to ensure that message is delivered, then of course they should like spread it as wide as they can. And if they don't see their message on some topical custom relay, then it's probably a choice of that relay's author and owners. And that's fine, because like if a topical relay is presented to the user as such that we are a custom relay and we only serve this small amount of filtered content, and user doesn't rely on only those custom relays in their relay list, then they're fine. Like if they know what they're doing. I don't think there's a good UI for like separating relays into standard or topical right now, but it's not a big deal. I think
Right, yeah.
It's pretty trivial. As soon as we have such custom relays, many of them, we will get there. So yeah, I think that's a good way to go. Like,
to me, it almost seems like we need to have a UI or UX decision about how a topical relay might be selected before we'll have enough kind of momentum behind a topical relay idea. So like if it doesn't make its way to the UI, how can it get the right sets of notes? Is it just by algorithmic curation or something?
Yeah. So there's no tool that anyone has built. I think I've never heard of them. Probably somebody has built it, but I've never heard of them. That would allow you to, well, you can manually do it. Like you can spin up your own relay and then make it so that only you could write to it. Like close the write access and leave it only for yourself. And then you could write a script that will write copy into that relay a post that you, I don't know, bookmark or every time you give it an ID of a post. And then anyone could just add that relay into their list of relays and select that relay in the global feed and get that list. So it's kind of doable if you know what you're doing, but there is no good tool to do that, as far as I know. I actually want to build one.
So is this an area that you're thinking about for Nostr.band? Would you start building kind of this relay selection or kind of relay scoring criteria?
No. First of all, I want to build the tool to create the curated feed relays, something like this. And then when we do have a selection of curated feeds, curated relays, URLs, then we probably can start measuring like their popularity and come up with some list, etc. But we should start somewhere first.
Right. And what is the state of the list stuff? Because I've seen like I saw the project that Jeff worked on where you can kind of see the lists, you can kind of navigate them a little bit. I think it's at lister.lol. And then you've been exploring lists as well. Are they currently implemented in some clients where you can sort of see an existing experience or kind of hypothesized or proposed experience?
So you can edit lists on Nostr.band, but you cannot view them at this point. You can view and edit lists on lister.lol, but it's not very polished experience. I think it has some bugs there. And and in some clients in Amethyst, you can select like the list to replace your global feed with the feed from your list. And I don't think other clients support any of that stuff yet. Yeah, so that's like the state of lists on Nostr.band.
Like for the Amethyst perspective is to try to change and see the view of the feed, not to try to find people to follow. Is that right?
Yeah. So those lists are for like switching your global feed from one, which is really global, into some, or like, no, from your home feed, from your main set of followers to another feed based on the people in the list. And, but there is no like, I'm not sure if any of the clients, maybe Amethyst does this. I think it does. If you like share a link to a list on Nostr so that the client would show that this is a link to a list, and then a person could view that list, and it would be super helpful if they could subscribe to that list to add it to their own like list of lists. I don't think any client has gone that far yet.
Right. And so do you see most of the Nostr.band list to be a service to be used in a UI that's run by kind of another client like Amethyst, or I think you mentioned, is it Current, Iris have also integrated some of these?
I don't think anyone else has any good integration with lists. And so lists are really not like Nostr.band's invention. Yeah, the NIP 51 that all those lists are based on was created like long ago for mute lists and bookmark lists. So bookmark list is a list of posts that you bookmarked. And so I just took advantage of that NIP and tried to like implement some of features that I envisioned on Nostr.band. And so like since Nostr.band is a search and discovery tool, it made total sense for me to like include adding to the list functionality there. But then the clients that are used for like feed consumption should now start supporting like switching feeds or sharing lists or subscribing to them. And I don't have any plans there yet, because I think like it's a different use case from the one that Nostr.band is built for. On Nostr.band, you will definitely be able to search for lists. You will be able to search through content by people in a list, these kind of things. Maybe trending lists will be there when we start liking them, zapping them, etc., or subscribing to them. But like the feed consumption should.
Can I log into Nostr.band to be able to add, like maybe add a list or follow people I find in a list, and then use that with my my private key on other like traditional consumption clients?
You can log in and you can create your list, and you can create many lists, and you can add people to those lists. And then you will see those lists in other clients that support this NIP, like in Amethyst. So it's not like some proprietary thing.
Okay, because I always think of, I'm mostly using Nostr.band for like the search. Like whenever I want to find somebody, it's easily the best way to search, like by a name or an old post that I remember seeing, I want to go recover. But then the idea of, because it's not so feed consumption oriented, the idea of logging in and making, connections to people through it, I guess doesn't somehow feel as natural today, but I think it should. I think it feels like it should be able to live here, or maybe even get used from here in different ways. I wonder if that's just a UX or kind of messaging thing, but is that a big way? Like I'd say the way that I often use Nostr.band is I use the little pull down from, I go search for something, maybe it's a keyword or a person, a person name. And then I use the pull down to copy the npub or something. And then I go, find that npub within the search of a particular client. I wonder, do you think that, is that the main use case, or do you think that it's easy enough for people to think about Nostr.band as a way to, like a place to go to curate their, kind of quality feed?
By curate, you mean like find new people and somehow do something with them, like add to a list or add the post to a bookmark? Or do you mean like consume a curated feed?
Yeah. No, I get that the consumption of curated feeds works really well in lots of clients that have done that. So the thing that Nostr.band does really well is you've got search and some trendingness and stuff. But I always think of Nostr.band as a place to go to do the search and to find the thing, and then to copy npubs and go to other clients to actually make connections and stuff, because I don't necessarily think as much about, I think in maybe one way to say this is Nostr.band is a little bit of like a management dashboard for discovering new people and content and doing search. But without being logged in, it actually gives a lot of the experience that way. So do people mostly realize you can log in, or do they think about it that way? Or is it worth trying to help people understand it better that way?
Well, I hope they do understand, because there are buttons like follow or add to a list. And if you click it, it will tell you that you should log in to do it. So hopefully they do. I don't have a deep analytics set up that would tell me like how many people do login and how many people don't and what they do on the site. It's definitely my wish to have people come to Nostr.band and do those simple actions like add to the list or follow on the site. It makes no sense to like copy paste npubs. And many times you don't really have to. Like if you try to push the open button there, it should work. It should like redirect you to Damos or something. And it should work with Damos now. It didn't work before. So yeah, like I hope we have some better solution for logging in other than like web extension. We have Nostr Wallet Connect, and maybe we could have something like Nostr Logging Connect, Nostr Key Store Connect. That would be great. But then you have to like store the keys in some always online custodial thing, which is not great. So I didn't try to solve it really. But yeah, like right now on the web, you have to have an extension, and that's kind of limits the experience. Maybe I should just publish like pack a website into a mobile app and distribute it as a mobile app. Then people would probably be fine pasting their sec key inside it. So we'll see.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think of Nostr.band as a great website utility. I go for a specific purpose of search and discovery, but then I don't know that I've ever used the logged in experience now that I'm thinking about it, because it does require like an LB or kind of a Chrome extension. And I'm still, as much as I know everybody's doing the right thing, I'm still very cautious about the web versus mobile apps, for kind of using private keys. So yeah, I wonder if there is a way to help either get people more comfortable with that, or maybe the point would be, I know a lot of the work you've been doing is thinking about how Nostr.band works as a service or as maybe a micro app that gets plugged in by other apps, which actually has a whole other, area of discussion that we were discussing on messaging. I wonder, is that, where is your head with respect to having maybe the website be the primary entry point to the Nostr.band experience versus, kind of optimizing the services to be more useful in kind of a micro app, kind of a container mode for other existing clients or sort of other ways to use it?
Yeah. So the idea of having some third-party component being integrated into a Nostr app, like in Damos, for instance, is an interesting one, but I haven't thought it through really. And what I did think about is just providing APIs for those clients. And so if a client decides to integrate the API, like a trending section or a search or recommendation API, like this week Snort released personal follow recommendations. If they decide to do it, then you like get the benefit of staying in your client and getting very similar functionality there. But so far it's quite limited, really. So the new version of Iris has trending stuff integrated. Snort does, and current.io does that. But not many others. Some do integrate search, but not the trending stuff. And then those clients themselves, even if they like integrated the, let's say, trending section, they don't have a way to manage lists. So you can't like do some stuff that you can do on Nostr.band. And so they could probably get there eventually, maybe, or maybe they would decide to not do that and leave it for third-party apps. Because like the feed consumption app already probably has enough buttons. And for instance, in Snort, there's a menu and there's like 10 buttons there in the menu. And you would have to like add more and more there. So APIs are good, but then we want micro apps. Everyone talks about micro apps. So maybe Nostr.band should just become a mobile app. Do you use your private keys in more than one app, more than one mobile app, or are they only in Damus and that's it?
The main one that I use is only in Damus, but I have some experimental ones that I use to play with other things. But yeah, I am hesitant even about plugging into other mobile apps. So, there's maybe something telling there. But it touches on this idea, and I think we were also talking about this idea. I don't know how far this is like too extreme from the kind of micro app idea, but should there be something of an orchestration app that its only purpose is to orchestrate micro apps and it's not in itself any particular defined experience, or the defined experience is open enough, like it has an easily defined experience, but it's easily swappable to other micro apps, so that instead of being kind of an end-to-end idea, it's sort of a pluggable set of ideas.
So it seems like...
Is that kind of idea too crazy for what micro apps may intend?
I don't know if it's crazy. So it looks like what you're describing is a sort of a browser that has a built-in key store extension, which would allow you to to switch between clients and not rely on having to paste your NSEC into each of them. I think the idea of Nostr Key Store Connect is a better probably approach. Like try to solve that thing is probably a better approach and more workable, because you would have a separate key store app that only does this one thing. It's open source, it's secure, etc. And then you can just connect it to all the other apps. So the only roadblock at this point that I see is that Nostr Wallet Connect works with custodial always online services. So like the key store would have to be like a server. If we just followed the same pattern, followed the same spec like with Nostr Wallet Connect. I think there are several proposals.
Nostr Wallet Connect is, I think, a slightly different problem because it needs the keys online, or it needs at least a wallet address to be receivable. Whereas I think that's maybe not the case in kind of Nostr keys.
Well, suppose like that your key store mobile app is on your phone and you're using Snort on your desktop, and Snort tries to connect to the key management app to have it sign the message for you. That app has to be like launched. It has to be online. And most mobile operating systems don't allow apps to run in the background. And it has to be like signaled somehow, like a notification must come to it and you have to click it, and then it will be allowed to launch. And then they would be allowed to talk. And then if you like close that key store app, the connection is gone. So it's not a convenient experience, definitely. But from what I can tell from like how you're describing your Nostr experience with keys, I would say it's a very important problem, I guess. Or maybe most of the people that use Nostr today don't care that much about their keys, so maybe they'd be happy to copy them into several apps. But eventually it should come to something like this.
I'm there definitely needs to be paranoid, but I don't.
There has to be one key store.
Can Nostr kind of So if there has to be one key store and that's sort of the core of the identity, what if we just think about that app being the one that has to be on while you're using it, and you use it with, you sort of use micro apps that fit into some framework? Like, because you were talking about this idea of like the obviation of the need for an app store. And I think this touches on that in a way, right? Like if you have your keys and your identity is managed by this app, why isn't everything downstream just sort of like browsable within this same app?
Yeah. So my post, an idea about not needing an app store is not really like, I should probably write more specific posts and describe my ideas more specifically. So I wrote there that, well, we might not need iOS, like Nostr is an app platform that replaces iOS. Well, I didn't really mean that we no longer need Android and iOS, of course. And
right.
And replacement for App Store, it's not about like we no longer need Android and thus we don't need a Play Store. No, we do need Android and
right.
And maybe Play Store, but not. We do need Android definitely as an operating system.
The Play Store could be for
but the Play Store,
key management apps.
The Play Store itself does one big thing. It curates the apps for you. It like checks them for viruses and it manages the catalog and the ranking and the payment processing. And so the payments are solved on Lightning, on Nostr, and the curation and all of that stuff we are right now trying to solve for Nostr. And if we solve them for content, then maybe we will be able to solve it for apps as well, like in a decentralized manner. Because like the problem at the core is very similar. It's a question of like, here's a piece of data. In one case, it's a picture or a post. And in another case, it's like a code. And someone has to like check it, vet it, recommend it. And that's kind of it. Like that's the whole purpose of an app store. And if we are going to solve this problem for content, then as well, we might solve it for apps. And the Play Store, if Nostr succeeds, we will definitely be able to replace. The question of like, will official iOS allow us to install an app that is not distributed through Play App Store? No, of course not. At least in the foreseeable future.
Right.
But things evolve. Right. Like, okay, on iOS we are going to use an addition. There will be an additional gatekeeper for a while, and on Android you can install an app from like a non-official location, and maybe the experience will get simpler there, or maybe efforts like that try to create like open alternatives to mobile operating systems start to get popular, and there maybe we will be allowed to download from Nostr. Who knows? So that's kind of the idea of
what's the
an app store
granularity
replacement.
In your mind? What's the granularity of a micro app that would be in this app store of the future?
Yeah, so I'm not too big of a believer in micro apps. Like, and a person cannot have more than, I don't know, a couple dozen apps like in their mind. Like on your phone, how many apps do you have that you really use? Most of them you probably don't use, but the ones that you use, there are probably a dozen of them. And so the micro app that does like one thing, like an app with 3 buttons, that's probably like too small, I think. It's so niche that like maybe something like Google Authenticator is an app that I use that has like 2 buttons. And that probably resembles the key store app that we were describing. But then aside from that, if you take Damos today and you start like splitting it into micro apps, like here's an app to follow someone, and here's an app to like reply, and here's an app to view a thread, and here's an app to, I don't know, listen to a music track. That's like a dozen apps for Damos itself already. That's way too much, I think. I don't think that people will be like, it makes sense to do it that small. And that's why I was skeptical about the micro apps idea initially, because it seemed like everyone were talking about like making those super small apps around a big thing, which is social network. And, but now that I at least think that Nostr is more of a data protocol, and we are going to have many more types of data flowing through Nostr. In that case, like a micro app in my head is just an app. Like it's just an app that uses different data type on Nostr. It can be like a Kindle replacement. It can be an app to replace your ebook reading experience. It's a full-fledged app. It has a lot of features, but it's dedicated to one theme or to one problem that you solve in your life. And so the micro apps that happen inside those super apps like WeChat, I probably would call those micro apps or plugins or something like this. What I think those super apps do is they just create their own marketplace, like their own app store inside them. Because they create a closed platform, like Nostr is a protocol, but that thing is a closed platform. They provide all the same infrastructure that Nostr provides, but it's centralized and closed. I haven't used WeChat, but like in Russia, there was vk.com. And I think Facebook in the year, like not like in the early days, they allowed a huge variety of apps. They gave them a lot of access to the API and to a lot of data. And people went crazy with all that data and did lots of interesting things. That's essentially what Nostr does. It just does it in an open way. And so I'm not sure that it like we have Nostr to have that open data infrastructure. And that's why I'm not sure if we need like super apps that would host other apps. Because when you are hosted somewhere, you are under control of under that thing, like inevitably. Otherwise, you would be like a separate thing, launchable separately.
Well, I guess like the level of abstraction, though, of like what is an operating system continues to change as history of compute advances, right? So it used to be that like what kind of hardware you have depends, what kind of operating system you can run. And maybe that's actually, like Mac or Linux or Windows, right? And then the level of abstraction for an operating system became kind of like what plugs into a browser or the internet, like kind of internet content, right? And I think the current mobile level of abstraction is, these kind of OSs with app stores, and the apps kind of are the things that run within those operating systems. But those operating systems become relatively commoditized relative to each other when everybody starts building the same app for both platforms, right? So my kind of question, I think people don't want tons of choice on a day-to-day basis around like which apps at the current level of what we think about as apps. But I do wonder if micro apps is, maybe it's a confusing terminology, but I wonder if there's something, I think it's sort of like what you're doing with Nostr.band as a search service, as a discovery service. It's like a fragment of utility that can be composed into other utilities. And maybe a user doesn't have to think, I'm going to Nostr.band search, but they just are using whatever surface they're using. And so they're using the Nostr.band search micro app just because like whatever Damus or Amethyst or Snort surfaces that at the right time when they want it, because they tap the search icon, not because they navigate to a separate app-like experience. And if that's the case, then I think what we may be talking about, you're talking about it as a data protocol. I might think about it as a new layer of operating system that allows a new layer of app thinking to happen, which is more these fragments, or I think maybe at least when I hear the term micro app, I think of these like fragments of functionality that get composed together into like today's apps.
Well, I like all of it. I like what you're saying, and it would be interesting to have like these smallish apps like distributed as Nostr events, and maybe they like live their life as Nostr events that contain, I don't know, some piece of code like JavaScript. But someone is definitely gonna play with such concepts. Someone is gonna build a website, Nostr something, that would load third-party apps as iframes, or would have a marketplace of plugins like WordPress, something like this, definitely someone's going to try it. But
Right.
without a centralized marketplace that is curated and verified that this code is like valid code, not it doesn't have viruses, etc.
Yep.
It's not like entirely clear how you're gonna choose them. Maybe it's solved with the same web of trust thing that we talked about before that. But yeah, well, if I were to launch, let's say I wanted to listen to a music that I got a link on Damos. I got a link to a music track, and Damos does not support listening to music itself. So it launches some applet or something that knows how to do it. And before launching it, it offers me like, hey, there are like these 3 music player things. Which of them would you prefer? And this one is used by these of your friends. And I click, okay, let's use that one. And then it remembers it. Yeah, it seems fine. It's probably a challenge, like technically, but as an experience, yeah, that sounds interesting. But
you do some of this today already on Nostr.band, right? Like I can go from the Nostr.band experience and it can say launch any of these clients, and it doesn't give the kind of social endorsement that you're suggesting, but like that's presumably another layer that could be built. It's not impossibly hard to imagine that.
I think
kind of
it's not like a fully integrated contained experience. Like I just throw you into a separate app. And right now I'm actually throwing you to the Nostr.app.link, which will have that web of trust, like suggestions and discovery there.
Yeah.
But it's still like I'm just sending you to another app. And right now with Nostr.app.link, we have like, this is the plan. We are working on a need to allow apps to add themselves into users' app list, essentially, or users publishing their app lists, which apps they use to handle this kind of events or those kind of events. And then any client potentially, but like the Nostr.app.link is built specifically for that, could curate that data on Nostr and show you like, here are the most popular apps for music tracks or for long form content, or here are the apps that your friends are using. And then you can choose which one of them you would like to use, and it will remember your settings, and next time it will send you there directly. But that's still a context switch. You're switching from one user interface and one flow to another. And I think it's a good start. Like we are going to start there and see if we can come up with some better, tighter integration. I'm not sure, because like even the closed garden cathedral model designed operating systems like iOS or Android don't really give too much of a way to like integrate two apps between them, like to take some components of some app and like inject it into another app, because there are probably lots of questions of security there and sandboxing, etc. And UX and UI, like it's hard to make a separate app somehow fit your design, etc. and branding and yeah. So
like
on the web, it's simpler, but on mobile it's not as simple. Yeah.
Right. I like this Nostr.app.link idea. I don't know that I don't know if I didn't digest it well until I looked at it, but let me try to describe what I understand it to be, and you can tell me if I got it right or not, because I think it's an important idea that so if you go to Nostr.app.link, it says paste a Nostr link to find an app. And a Nostr link could be an npub, a note, an n-event, an n-profile, an n-adder, or any Nostr app link.
Anything.
Right? Yeah. So I would paste like maybe anything from Nostr into that, and then it says show apps. And it is then going to look for apps that are handlers of that type of event or that type of activity that I just pasted. This seems like it's that routing layer for routing between composable micro apps or composable ideas, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that feels to me kind of like this thing that we're talking about, like this idea you mentioned about this music player. It can launch a music player and it can say, oh, DK, you've never played music before, but let me show you the one that Artur is using. Maybe you want to use that one, right?
Yeah.
And I could even just, maybe I set something to say, don't even ask me as long as Artur is using something, just give me that one first, and then I can later change it in some config, right? But this feels to me like it could, I mean, we kind of need to come to consensus on how some of these UIs work. And obviously there's no consensus because we don't even have the tools yet. But this idea of Nostr app.link and the way it helps people understand what apps could be used, in a sense, it's a form of an app store, right?
Yeah, exactly. But like the cool thing here is that any app can integrate this web of trust app selection. So Damos does not really have to forward people to Nostr app.link. It can just query Nostr, ask, give me app recommendations by the people I follow, and then aggregate them and show the user. If they don't have like the already saved setting, they can show like, here are 10 apps, their picture, name, etc. Which one would you prefer? This one is used by your friend X and Y. And I would click on one of them, and then Damos would remember that choice and would forward the person there immediately later. So the Nostr app.link currently does that. It can be like a separate middleware on someone's route to the target app. If like Damos does not want to implement that at this point, it can forward people to the Nostr app.link. That's one like feature of it. But then the second feature of it is that it's just a much richer experience. Like, okay, you can switch from Damos to a target app if it does the lookup itself. But if you want to browse apps, you can go to Nostr app.link. You can find apps for music. You can find trending apps, I guess. That's kind of the idea here. And then again, it's all stored on Nostr.
So npub in, I can see those apps filtered by follow lists and by people, right?
So it's like
such a thing could be built, right?
all the same discovery ideas that we have around content apply to apps as well.
But so I mean, I guess I think I'm missing something, because I feel like you've actually built this thing that to me looks like an app store with social recommendations possible, like in the structurally possible, because you don't have to leave to go visit a traditional app store. You kind of just can on the fly. You already have your social identities, you have your graph identities on the fly. You could imagine showing all of that and then selecting an app or having a default selected because your client chose it. And it feels like it is that meta layer, that kind of new OS type thing. So is there some area where the way that I was describing it is not the right way? Because it sounded like you had some concerns with the way the UX of such apps might work, or the way you kind of, maybe some of the, the iframe, people spamming these things.
Well, I view it as switching between apps.
Constructed versions of that?
I just view it as switching between apps. Like I click,
with
press
apps
on a
defined
link.
as like an iOS app.
Or a website. Like it can be web to another web, or web to mobile, or web to desktop if you're on the desktop. So it's just a way to switch between apps. And the idea that I think as far as I understand that you are thinking about, is more of like inlining another app into a host app, something like this. So like this is definitely about
the
switching.
Super app model from WeChat, I think, right. But like the Super app model from WeChat really takes away the OS layer from being Android or iOS, and it moves it to being WeChat as the OS. And then the car dispatch, the Uber equivalent, is not something you interact with by launching Uber on iOS. You launch Uber on WeChat, right? The Uber equivalent. And I think what Nostr.band.link does is it says you could have the, I don't know, what did you call it? Nostr Key Connect would be kind of the super app. And then it could launch the Uber equivalent, or if you don't like Uber, unlike WeChat, you can't switch it out. In this mechanism, you could say, switch it out. I don't like to use that one. I like to use this other one. So configure that in. But Nostr.band.link is the like discovery switching service. That's why I think of it as like the app store. But I think WeChat as a super app has already kind of done the work. It's shown one model for a closed system of abstracting the mobile OS away into a communication OS. And I think Nostr is similarly that communication OS layer.
Yeah.
And so these other apps could be launched off of that communication OS layer. And I think that's what you built. But maybe I'm still just wrapping my head around these new models.
I think everything you're saying is right. It's just that if you're building an app for WeChat, you are limited in your choice of like a tech stack with something that WeChat supports.
Right.
It probably supports some JavaScript web apps. And with this thing and Nostr, it's all open and you can write your app in whatever language, platform, etc. that you choose. You can have different builds for different operating systems. Like Iris, it's built for all. There's a web version, mobile, Android, iOS, and desktop versions of it. And people can have like more or less frictionless experience, whatever the platform is. And then since the app can be native, it can be like performant, it can be a game or video something app, which would probably perform much better than a web app. And it's just more choice there. And so yeah, like as I said, we will definitely see some super app try like suggesting other builders that they build micro apps that will be hosted inside that super app. There's nothing like wrong with that. I just think that on Nostr we have more options, and the super app will probably try to exert some power on those micro apps one way or another, because it's like a host app, and it will probably take some rent from them, which will probably push them to like try to be standalone things. So yeah, like I'm not against it. It's just that we've seen what embedded apps.
I'm a little bit against the idea of having a closed app that can control which apps, like has full dominance of control over that. That seems. I would sort of advocate against that idea, because I think like the market will not support such an idea.
Yeah,
but the thing I guess I'm advocating not for a super app, but I'm saying, is Nostr the operating system for multiple super apps, but this sort of coordination or orchestration could live just beyond the key store? Like the key store is kind of one entry point to kind of this orchestration, but Nostr is really the layer. And if the super app provider kicks you off, well, you've got your keys and maybe it's stored as a kind that then lets you go to another kind of super app browser that you can plug your keys in, and then you're going again with all the same functionality. So really it's not a single app being the super app, but Nostr is a super app like protocol.
Yeah. So
but maybe we're saying maybe it's
like right now, as I'm thinking about it, yeah, it's possible that like several super apps will sort of win, precisely because like people don't like having dozens and dozens of apps that they occasionally use. So I guess that's possible that even without this social discovery thing that I built, some super app could build like its own internal discovery thing. But since we do have this open one, I guess it will probably be easy to switch between like those closed, more like not closed gardens, but like integrated gardens to something external if you have to. And that's kind of great. That's the whole point, I guess, of Nostr being open.
Yeah. It's cool. Well, yeah, I'm excited to see more of kind of how this area progresses. It sounds like there's a lot of at least active discussion around it and people trying to figure out the edges of it. I know we don't have too much more time reserved, but I did want to get to at least a couple other topics. One was kind of what I was calling kind of the joy of Nostr development, and the tee up for this is that I think you were writing before kind of in private about how much fun you were having developing on Nostr and how it felt very different than maybe some other stuff you've worked on. And I wanted to hear more about that, because I think, I meet people all the time and I tell them about Nostr. I tell them about my excitement and how much stuff can be done. And I think sometimes they don't they don't really know where to start. Do I build my own Twitter clone client? Do I, find an existing one and try to contribute to an open source project? Do I find a certain Telegram I should be connecting to so that I get into the flow of information? I was going to say, one thing I think you've done a good job at since I think we met maybe early this year, right? I think it was January, maybe. So
Yeah,
you were kind of building something on your own a while back that you thought would be useful. But then you've over time really graduated to getting plugged into all of the frontier of thinking around Nostr development so that you have all the best, what is relevant to be thinking about and what are the areas that people are sort of building consensus on in development. And I wonder if you were to sort of meet yourself, from back in January and you were trying to sort of explain to yourself, okay, here's the learnings, here's how I would get connected. Here, I would start by, working with an existing project, contributing something, or I'd start with a certain micro app that is in mind. How do you imagine people should, or what advice would you have to people to get started with Nostr development today?
Yeah, so I guess my excitement thing that for those who didn't read my posts is that I was saying that my productivity on Nostr is very high because there's very tight feedback loop here, and there's also a frontier of unresearched things to do and try, and almost anything that you're gonna try will probably be different in one way or another. It may be really new, or it may be significantly different from all the other stuff that exists because there is not much, and so it's just fun to do. If someone wants to have a side project, a hobby project, or maybe has hopes for this project becoming something more than just a hobby, I think Nostr is perfect for that, because right now that I realize it's not just about social, it's really absolutely anything you have in mind can be built here, and you immediately get, as I said, you don't need to have a backend. You can just write to relays and read from them. You don't need to care about that part. You don't need to care about how to onboard users without too much friction. Just post on Nostr, and all those users already have signed up. They have their account. They can just enter into your app and start using. If you are reusing something existing, some existing data type, like a music track, which Nostr is building, or a highlight or something, then you also your app immediately plugs into the sea of data, of existing data that other people have created already. And you have Lightning integrated in many ways. So you can try to monetize things. You can try to perform some transactions. You can sell something. And so, there are so many, and the platform is open. You can build on whatever language that you choose. It can be a web app, a native app, a desktop app. So it's just such a huge surface of possibilities that I would say absolutely any builder can turn their pet idea into something that can work on Nostr and then come and build it here. And then there's also Jack Dorsey's 5 million grant that can be thought about. So
this is the OpenStack funding?
Yeah, I'm talking about that one. So I would say that if I wasn't building something for Nostr 6 months ago, if I heard about it today and heard all the stuff that I listed right now, it would be I would definitely start building something here. And where would I start? Which manuals or documents or Telegram groups I should read? I have no idea. Everyone in development or building is very different, have different backgrounds and interests, and they should just follow their intuition and etc. But the overall space here is very interesting. It's kind of competitive, but it's very new. So it's not in all other places. You can type your idea in Play Store and there are probably 100 apps doing what you had in mind. But here on Nostr, it's probably 0 apps doing what you have in mind. So you can it's really fun. Like almost anything you do, you are the first one to do it. That's cool. It's like going to America to discover it.
Kind of do you have any favorite pet kind of hello world app, or kind of a very simple thing that you think would be fun but you've never seen somebody build before?
No, unfortunately, I don't have very simple ideas. Like, well, a couple of days ago, I saw the recipes app on Stacker News. Somebody built an app to publish recipes on Nostr.
Yeah.
I think it's like a huge market. Like if you think about how much content is built on the web around recipes, it's absolutely enormous. And then you cannot really search through that pool of information in any meaningful way. Like you can't say, give me like these recipes that are built with these ingredients that I can cook like in 30 minutes, etc. Right. And I have it not like in some closed garden big website that hosts recipes, but like to have access to all of them. You cannot do any analytics on all the recipes that are out there. They're like that's what I'm talking about. Like if someone builds a recipes app on Nostr and it takes off, then you can probably build much more interesting stuff than you could yourself if you tried to build the thing for like existing web ecosystem. Like, okay, you can build a recipes website, but how do you get recipes there? Okay, maybe you can have like 10,000 recipes there, but all the other million is out there on big websites. Here, right. If it takes off, then you can have access to all the recipes, even ones created by like other people in other apps. So it's really interesting. And
yep. And maybe you end up hosting the premier recipes relay, right?
Yeah, I guess. So these kinds of things were the existing, like what I would like someone to build is an app that would give my kids curated video feed. Like YouTube suggests total garbage there. Even YouTube Kids application suggests very stupid, bad videos there. I want to see videos that were curated by people I trust. And I think it's pretty trivial to build on Nostr. And it's not trivial to have like to find the curators for that experience. But the app itself seems like pretty simple.
Right.
And yeah, I saw some kids apps initiatives on Nostr, but I have never heard of them after they were announced. So, but these will all be built by someone, and without having to build backend, without having to build like account creation system, password recovery system, without having to build backend of it. So it's so easy to start, and yeah, I hope we.
Yeah, you don't have to build.
If we change the
video hosting, you don't have to build that.
Yeah, well, you can just post links to other video hosting services. You can just literally just scroll through YouTube, find a good video, and copy the link into that app, and that's kind of it. Like the whole experience there. Well, maybe there needs to be like kids version and curator version of the app, but the idea is pretty simple.
Right.
So I think
and I think the idea that you're proposing as a kids curation applies even broader, right?
Yeah, well, that's something that bothers me, but the idea overall can fit in many different places. So I think if we start describing Nostr not as something social, replacement of something social like Twitter, but as a new app platform, it's not really a platform. It's not just a protocol because it already contains several like parts and extensions. I don't know, like it's a new environment for creating new apps that work, that have access to all this given infrastructure. It's very easy to start. There are already some libraries. I think we're going to get much more attention from developers than if we were to pitch it like a Twitter replacement.
Right. Yep. So it's like open for anybody who wants to develop. The development starting up developing is very easy to get started. You have very little requirement. You can just build the client and take any idea, and it's probably greenfield where nobody's even touching it yet. So you can really carve out some space, and it's like a whole new frontier.
Exactly.
So it's exciting to be playing there.
Yeah, well, I don't look that exciting because it's late.
I know we're running up. I know. I was going to say we're running up against the end of your day, and I know you were generous to make some time at late night for you. So thanks for making the time to come by. It was fun to catch up.
Thank you very much, David.
And hopefully we can keep the conversation flowing. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.